everybody, and welcome into Commodity Culture, where we break down commodities markets, sound money principles, and geopolitics, all with the goal of making you a better investor in the commodities sector. My name is Jesse Day. Today is April 13th, 2026, and I'm thrilled to welcome Alex Krainer to the program, a geopolitical analyst, author, hedge fund manager, and the creator of iSystem Trend Following. Alex believes the U.S. is facing a dire situation in Iran, and their recent decision to blockade the Strait of Hormuz looks more like a desperate gambit to avoid declaring defeat than a strategic move that has any chance of succeeding. Alex also sees the EU's continued effort to remilitarize as a dark omen, and the European elite fantasy of defeating Russia at any cost won't end until one side is completely defeated. Spoiler alert, Alex believes it's not Russia that will fall, and he outlines how he thinks both the war in Iran and Ukraine will ultimately reshape the global world order forever. So strap yourselves in for my conversation with Alex Krainer. Alex Krainer, it is great to have you back on Commodity Culture. Last time I had you on the show was January this year. Now, at that time, there were talks of a potential war with Iran brewing. You did not think the U.S. would attack Iran at that time. Now that we're here, knee-deep in a conflict that doesn't look like it's ending anytime soon, with the latest negotiations in Pakistan falling apart, why do you think the U.S. ultimately decided to start this war? How much of the decision, if any, was based on pressure from Israel, and how do you see it playing out from here?
Well, it's a great mystery, and obviously the Israeli dimension is one of the very plausible explanations for why this went the way it went, because we now know that Benjamin Netanyahu has been lobbying practically every government since George W. Bush 43, into attacking Iran. This has been like his life's work, and every administration up until now declined, including Trump in 2019. And back then, it wasn't just Netanyahu's lobbying, it was also a pressure campaign applied internally, but led by the British embassy, by Ambassador Sir Kim Darroch. We know that from the leaks of cables between the British embassy in Washington and the Foreign Office in London by Anonymous in 2019, which created such a scandal that London had to recall Sir Kim Darroch and nominate a new ambassador. Also on the campaign trail and all the way throughout his political career, Trump has been underscoring how incredibly dumb it would be to go to war against Iran, that this would be a distraction from other problems and so forth at home. And so based on everything that I thought I understood about American politics and geopolitics, I thought it would be spectacularly dumb for him to attack the Iranians. But on 28 February, he pulled the trigger and he went ahead with it. I don't know why exactly, but one of the most likely explanations is Israel's influence in the U.S. politics, which is tremendous. I mean, I watched a video a few weeks ago of an independent journalist going through the halls of U.S. Congress and asking people, congressmen and staffers, USA first or Israel first? And I didn't see a single one of them say USA first, which should be normal, but it seems that nobody dares even say that. It's not anti-Semitic, It's not. It shouldn't be controversial, given that all these people are there to represent the interests of the American people. But it seems that nobody even dares to say America first in U.S. Congress. And then there's also the strange fact that every time Benjamin Netanyahu goes to the United States and addresses the joint session of Congress, he gets 100 standing ovations. Doesn't matter if he's up to his elbows in genocide of Palestinian peoples. Nothing matters. Support for Israel seems to be the main prime obsession of the American political class. That requires an explanation. But regardless, even without this, we've had a whole series of documents of testimonials by American, starting with America's former CENTCOM commander, General McKenzie, various think tanks, American intelligence agencies, all of whom agreed that A, Iran is not a threat, that B, Iran has stopped working on nuclear program in 2003, and they never restarted it. This was reiterated by a unanimous, high confidence finding by all U.S. intelligence agencies, and reiterated the last time in March of 2025 by Tulsi Gabbard. And nothing changed. Nothing changed at all. There was no other finding that now said, like, oh, well, I guess we were wrong, or Iran restarted work on a nuclear weapon. So it amounts to basically Trump administration simply overruling all of their intelligence agencies and saying, no, 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 we think that Iran is working on a nuclear weapon after all, and therefore, we have to attack them, because if we don't, then they will attack us first, and then, that would jeopardize Israel's security and so forth. But there's also a strategic point of view, which was also unanimous, that Iran had escalatory dominance in the region, and that attacking Iran would probably be a catastrophic mistake. They went ahead nonetheless, which is amazing to me, but it had to be, that attack had to wait for Donald Trump. I have to add another element, because the mystery of Donald Trump is that in 2019 he knew not to do that, and in all his, speeches, statements, campaign promises, he was saying no new war, we should not attack Iran, we will not attack Iran, and so forth. And then he went and did it anyway. One important element that changed in the meantime is the overthrow of the Syrian regime of Bashar al-Assad. And that was seen as precondition. You can't attack Iran until you take down Bashar al-Assad. And so they've done this. So that might have been part of the change as well. At any rate, it didn't change the equation that the attack had a very long shot likelihood of achieving any of its goal, and very, very probable likelihood of unintended consequences and opposite effects. Namely, it hasn't dislodged the Iranian regime, it hasn't ended their nuclear program, it hasn't ended their ballistic program, and it has made them stronger than they've ever been. The United States has lost 13 military bases in the region. It has had to pull their naval assets at least 500 miles away from the Strait of Hormuz, and the Iranians are now firmly in control of the Strait of Hormuz. All of which doesn't look like it's going to go away anytime soon. And again, the only way that the United States and Israel could solve these problems militarily is if they use nuclear weapons. But it's questionable if even then they would be able to solve the problem that they created. So now, we are where we are. It's it's an amazing turn of events. I have to say I didn't see it coming. I didn't think that they would pull the trigger on this, but this is where we are now.
The sponsor of today's episode is ARC Silver Gold Osmium. Owner Ian Everard is praised even by his competitors as one of the most honest and level-headed bullion dealers in the United States. They have some great prices. You can see some of them displayed right now on screen. Take advantage of these specials today by reaching out to Ian at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com. Make sure to tell him, of course, that Commodity Culture sent you. And now, back to the interview. I want to bring up three different points when it comes to the potential reasons for this conflict that people have been talking about. One is religion, the Christian Zionist movement in the United States. You know, Trump just posted a piece of artwork on Truth Social with himself as Jesus healing the sick and people praying to him and stuff like that. He has some crazy woman, Paula Luna or something. No, that's a congresswoman. The faith minister, which is some crazy new position that exists, and she's an absolute nut job Christian Zionist who has compared Trump to Jesus on Easter weekend. She did that. And of course, Pete Hegseth, there's footage of him talking about bringing back the third temple in Jerusalem. What a miracle that would be. Obviously, on Netanyahu's side and the Israeli side, we know the Zionist movement. There's a very extreme side to that as well that sees the end of days and Armageddon being brought about as kind of integral to how they want things to play out. How much of it do you think could be driven by these religious ideologies behind the scenes? How much could be driven by the blackmail angle, which some people are saying, oh, Trump is doing this is because Mossad has blackmailed him with the Epstein files. There's videos of him doing compromising things. And so Netanyahu has basically told him, hey, you better attack Iran or we're going to release these tapes. And then finally, the third piece of the puzzle I'd like you to consider, I asked multi-part questions, so I apologize, is the mental decline aspect. Trump is, 80 years old now. He's surrounded by a group of people who seem to be influencing him in a certain direction. It's often been said that the last person who talks to him generally gets what they want. It's easy to sway his opinion through flattery, etc. So the religious angle, the blackmail angle, and cognitive decline, perhaps due to age and other factors, do any of these you think play any realistic role in how things have gone so far?
Well, I think they all play a role, but I think that all these roles are secondary. You know, the religious aspects is probably a fairly desperate way to try to engineer consent for a big war. Because, you know, there's a segment of American population that want that, you know, like they're looking for the second coming of Christ. They want to bring this about. They see this as a potential Armageddon, and this might usher, you know, some new messianic time. So obviously, you know, they might get very excited if they see Trump in some major biblical role in all these events. And so, you know, you have that Paula White there, who is, I think, certifiably a nut job, who should probably be probably should be in a padded room with you know, some medications applied, but you know, she's there at the White House, being the minister of faith. Then the questions of blackmail, I think it's possible. I was never inclined to believe this because, you know, the Democrats were in possession of Epstein files even at the time when they had control of the presidency and the Congress, and they were trying desperately to put Trump away. I thought if there was something compromising, they would have used it. And then, you know, we also had Julian Assange, who said that there was nothing incriminating in those files against Trump. But on the other hand, who knows? You know, at this stage, we have to admit that maybe there is something there, you know, or maybe there are other ways in which the Zionists are capable of blackmailing or coercing Trump to do their bidding in some way. With respect to Trump's cognitive decline, I've always been of the opinion that we shouldn't listen to what Trump says, because this has always been the case. In fact, not just these last few years, but it's always been the case that he was very inclined to make controversial statements, often revolting statements, for whatever reason. But this may have been part of his act, to pretend to be a certain way, to scandalize a part of the people, part of the population, in order to create a smokescreen while he was doing something else, and so forth. But he is in his late 70s. He's almost 80 years old, I think, right? And so it is possible that he is in some kind of a cognitive decline phase. Unfortunately, I don't know an answer to any of these questions, and I'm very skeptical of people who go out there and pretend that they can, diagnose somebody's psychiatric condition on the basis of their statements and conduct in public. What's certain is that something has gone off the rails on 28 February of this year, and we are now in past that inflection point. And I think that the problem with all wars is that it's very easy to start them, but then they end up having a dynamic of their own, and you can't easily pull the genie back into the bottle. So now, the realities that are unfolding are outside of anyone's control, and we don't know exactly where they will lead us. So, we'll have to just sit back and watch the pageant, and then we'll find out.
You wrote in a recent edition of iSystem Trend Compass, the creation of Israel in 1948 has been little more than the British Empire's geopolitical gambit. Walk us through Britain's role in Israel, because I think a lot of people aren't aware of it, and how British influence is currently shaping their actions on the global stage.
Well, the Zionist project has been a project of the British Empire from the get-go, because the intent, the desire to create a bridgehead in Western Asia goes back to, I think, early 1870s. But the area was controlled by the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire had their own, geopolitical priorities and ideas, and they weren't necessarily cooperative with the British Empire. So it was necessary to take down the Ottoman Empire. And so to do that, they had to stage an Arab revolt. But the Arab people are, they're not terribly united bunch. So the idea was to create a homeland for the Jews, and as back at that time, the far and away the most influential think tank that was actually kind of driving the geopolitics of the British Empire was the so-called Round Table Group, or Milner's Kindergarten. Milner's means, run by Alfred Milner, who was, probably the most influential person in the British Empire at the time. And so they had they together, one of the people who was closely involved was Lord Walter Rothschild. And so he was the recipient of the so-called Balfour Declaration, which was basically nothing more than a memo written by Lord Arthur Balfour to Lord Walter Rothschild, saying, His Majesty's government, blah blah blah, looks favorably upon establishment of a Jewish homeland, in Palestine. And so this memo somehow is today deemed a valid legal basis for the creation of the State of Israel. And so that goes back to 1917, before World War II, before the Holocaust, before many of the events that happened in between. But the relevant factor was the discovery of oil in the Middle East. And at that time, oil was extremely important because it was seen as a very strategic energy resource, particularly for the British Navy, which was up until that time, they had sailing ships and steam-powered ships, which had many disadvantages compared to oil. So the British decided that they wanted to absolutely dominate the global oil industry, the trade of oil and the production of oil and refinement and so forth. And the Middle East was, in addition to Pennsylvania and Mexico, seen as the region to control, if you wanted to control the oil trade in the world. So, they had to overthrow the Ottoman Empire, which they did by staging Arab Revolt and also the Balkan Wars. And then they had to create a beachhead in the Middle East. And they decided to do that by, as the alumni of the Milner Roundtable put it in an interview that was published, I think, in 1919 or 1916, I forget. It was the desire that basically what they said, that if Great Britain wanted to remain a maritime empire, they needed to cede the region, the Eastern Mediterranean, with what they called a particularly patriotic race. And so this was how they viewed the establishment of the State of Israel, which then, after many chess moves, finally happened in 1948. And since 1948, Israel has served exactly the same purpose for which it was created, and that is to keep the region continuously destabilized and at war, so that none of these resource-rich nations could emerge as regional powers that could challenge the empire, that could say no, that could decline the diktat. With the exception of Iran, right? Because after 1978, little by little, slowly, Iran emerged as that independent regional power that decided to keep their sovereignty and independence. So for that reason, it is necessary to regime change them and to remove the current government and replace it with the Shah, which would be, exactly the same deal as setting up Ukraine under Zelensky, or setting up Saudi Arabia under the Al Saud family, or setting up Russia under Boris Yeltsin, and so forth. And then Iranian power could be eliminated, or it could be co-opted to again be in the orbit of the Western Empire. These are the reasons for war. These are the ultimate causes of this war that we see now, and all the other reasons that are being given. The nuclear program, the ballistic program, women's rights. These are all pretexts, and they're only being paraded in order to engineer acquiescence of Western populations for war. Iran and Iranian regime are being nonstop demonized in the West, so that we kind of think like, oh, well, yeah, it's a good thing if they killed all these Iranian leaders because they were all bad. We don't know the first thing about why they were bad. We were just being told that they were bad, in the same way that we were told that Bashar al-Assad was terrible and he had to go. He was killing his own people. And Muammar Gaddafi was killing his own people. He was a madman. He had to go. And before that we had Saddam Hussein, and the Taliban were terrible, and Slobodan Milosevic was horrible. He had to go. And before that, we had Salvador Allende in Chile. He was a communist. He had to go. And Daniel Ortega and Manuel Noriega. And it's always the same story. It's always the same thing. But it seems that some segment of Western populations has the attention span of a goldfish, and so they swallow the same stories again and again and again, like we haven't lived through the same movie so many times before. And now you have all these people who are convinced that, oh my God, the Iranians are so terrible, and it has to be, they have to be taken down. But it's in fact the same thing as ever, and the real reason is control of resources, control of trade routes, and most importantly, control of collateral with which to give Western financial system a new massive credit impulse. Iran is fifth richest nation in terms of natural resources in the world, with an estimated about $30 trillion in natural resource wealth. If all that came under political dominance of Western powers, then it would be Western corporations that would be developing these resources, and it would be the Western banking system that would fund all these developments. And so that's the ultimate reason for why this is being done, as it always has been since the beginning of Western colonialism.
And going back to where we are right now today with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, the latest is Trump saying the US Navy is going to start blockading the strait, potentially stopping ships from passing who have agreed to pay a toll to Iran. We all know the story. 20% of the world's oil supplies go through the strait. Many other vital commodities, urea, natural gas. And of course, we've also seen the destruction of natural gas facilities. Many of them shut down now due to risks of potential attacks. And this has put a major squeeze on energy prices. How bad could this get in your view? Because we hear all sorts of reports out there, some people on the more extreme side saying this could lead to a complete, global worldwide recession, energy crisis, food shortages. When you're looking at the situation as it stands today, assuming that this doesn't get resolved within the next few weeks or months, how bad do you think things could get for the global economy?
They could get very, very bad. We have to keep in mind that most of Iranian oil exports go to China. I think the figure is 80 or 90% or even more. So what the Trump administration is effectively saying is that they will block China's oil supplies, which could, have a very severe adverse impact on Chinese economy. So, Chinese will be justified in sending their navy to accompany the tankers that export Iranian oil to China. And if they do that, then there's a risk of direct confrontation between Chinese Navy and American Navy. And so this could precipitate a war between the United States and China. So it's an incredibly, incredibly reckless gamble. I don't know who came up with this idea, but it pits the United States almost against everybody else, because it's exacerbating the risk of an economic crisis for everyone, for economic recession in practically the whole rest of the world. It's putting China, Japan, India, and other nations in a position to find themselves in an open conflict against the United States, and the United States at fighting World War III against everybody else, and or having American naval ships sunk by one of these navies, or if the Iranians decide to sink an American ship in the Gulf of Oman, if they're capable of doing that, then the whole rest of the world will be applauding them. So it's simply incomprehensible. It feels a lot like the Trump administration is making it up as they go along in order to concede defeat, avoid conceding defeat. This would be the point in time when they should say, all right, we messed up. This was a very bad thing. Let's just get the hell out. Instead, they're like, oh, you're gonna close the gate of Hormuz? No, we're gonna close the gate of Hormuz. Just watch us now. And so what are they gonna do now? Now they're gonna be actively policing maritime traffic in the Gulf of Oman. In addition to this being a very dumb idea, it requires a lot of military assets in the region because like this is hundreds of ships traverse this region on a daily basis. How are you gonna board every single ship that goes in and out, and then ask them to justify themselves? Did they pay the toll to Iran? Did they pay for the cargo in dollars or in yen or in whatever? What are you gonna do? I mean, I don't see, Jesse, how this works, how this can even be done. It will require a massive and ongoing commitment. It will put the U.S. Navy and American soldiers to a completely new job that they will have to, like now they're going to be the policemen of the Gulf of Oman. A big undertaking. And for what? To what end? It's just staggeringly idiotic. It cannot work. But I guess it avoids them having to concede defeat. They get to pretend that they have upper hand, that they can do more, that they can, you know. Iran is policing a 20-mile strait that is, all in the line of sight of Iranian authorities, right? Gulf of Oman is something else, and American naval ships cannot get close to the Gate of Hormuz to try to police it there. It's just a logistical and operational nightmare for no good reason other than it being a problem for the whole rest of the world. It's just bizarre. It's sad. It's like deeply and greatly unfortunate.
Yeah, definitely agree with you there. I want to pivot to the EU for a moment because you've spoken on this show before about the EU leadership looking for reasons to go to war with Russia, to rally around the flag, get their citizens behind it. And now we're seeing a British general, Sir Richard Barrons. He said, the war in Iran and Russia's aggression in Europe must be a wake-up call for the entire country. We must all unite in a national effort to beef up our defenses while there is still time. Otherwise, it could be too late. Now, we've seen in your home country of Croatia, starting in January this year, they started some sort of mandatory military service. Germany is now putting a law in the books that, well, officials say, don't worry, guys, this law isn't really doing much yet. We're allowing military-aged males to leave the country for as long as they want now. It's approved. However, we reserve the right at some point in the future to start making them report to the military before they spend more than 3 months overseas. So it seems like the EU is moving in this direction. Even Canada today, I saw some high-ranking Canadian general on TV there saying Canada must now prepare for a greater, a world in global conflict. What is going on here? Where is all this leading? Do you see EU countries directly entering a war, whether that's Russia or the Middle East? What's going on here?
Part of the political class in European countries and the EU are definitely committed to escalating the situation to a great war against Russia. And this has been talked about for a very long time now. I think that if not since February 2022, then probably since the failure of the famous summer counteroffensive in the summer of 2023. Ukrainian counteroffensive against Russia, because remember they were going to celebrate the summer in Crimea, yeah. So that didn't work out. They realized that they might lose the war against Ukraine, and they had to think what happens when we run out of the last Ukrainian. Then we have to we can't just let it go. If you look at the long cycle of history, you find that Russia has been at the receiving end of invasions, sabotage, terrorism, infiltration, regime changes by Western powers since the 1200s. Okay, it's been just one thing after another. If it wasn't a military invasion, they tried to set up Polish kings as false rulers of Russian lands on two occasions. The two false Dimitris. They tried various invasions, most famously Napoleon's and Hitler's 1941 and Napoleon in the early 1800s. These were absolutely massive undertakings. They've done regime change operations. I think the most successful one was the Bolshevik Revolution. I grew up in the communist world, and we studied this period of history, and we were told that this was like a revolution by the working class against the decadent, oppressive Tsarist regime. But the real history doesn't warrant any of that. It was a fake narrative. We know now that the leaders of the Bolshevik Revolution were all infiltrated from the West, led by Lenin and Trotsky, who were financed by Western European and Wall Street bankers. We know that before they took power in St. Petersburg, that the American Red Cross mission came to, well, it was Petrograd at the time, right? Came to Petrograd and stayed there for 3 months. Basically, they managed the revolution, and since then, Russia was under the communist rule for 70 some years, right? And then in 1990s, when the Soviet Union finally collapsed, again we had government of Boris Yeltsin, who worked 2 hours a day. He was surrounded by Western advisors, and he was basically signing and rubber stamping whatever they put in front of him. And this period was almost led to the complete failure of Russia as a state, and they siphoned off literally hundreds of billions of Russian wealth westward. And then came Vladimir Putin, and he asserted Russia's independence and sovereignty, turned Russia into a prosperous, powerful state. But now the West wants to take it down. And as they never stopped trying to subjugate Russia since the 1200s onwards, they never will stop. So the failure of the proxy war through Ukraine will be carried on by new proxy wars. They will try. They have already tried to open the second front in the Balkans by imposing a war on Serbia, and then basically what that was going to do is bring Serbia and Croatia into conflict. Croatia being a NATO nation, then that could potentially give them a pretext to activate Article 5, NATO collective defense. They would attack Serbia, then Russia, could not sit on the sidelines, and voila, pronto, you have a second front in that war. Apparently, this all dissipated since Trump came to power, thankfully. But now, alternative second front could be in the Baltics. Long story short, Jesse, they will not give up. They just simply will not give up until one side or the other is completely defeated and exhausted. And I think it's predictable that the side that's going to end up defeated is the West. But what happens then? I don't know. at any rate, Europe is now at risk of militarization and Nazification in the same way as Ukraine was in between 2014 and 2022, and in the same way that Germany was from 1933 onwards. And this is very clearly the intent of these leaders in Europe, like Starmer, Macron, Friedrich Merz. And we have to also recognize that they are a few rungs down on the totem pole below people who really run the show. And what is very certain is that the top of the totem pole reaches the Western banking cartel.
Well, Alex, great conversation. Before I do let you go, just one final thought. Very consequential elections just took place in Hungary. Viktor Orban losing, Peter Magyar, the new prime minister of Hungary. Now, interesting to note, a lot of people are calling him a far left EU puppet, but he did actually run on being against immigration. In fact, he said he was going to be stronger on immigration laws than Orban was. I wonder what your thoughts are on the future of Hungary moving forward based on this election.
Well, let's see what happened. Friedrich Merz also ran on anti-immigration in Germany because that's what was required for him to prevail over AfD, right? And so once he did, he immediately broke all of his promises to the German people, and the immigration continued unabated. And so Peter Magyar looks to me like exactly the kind of character that was required to do the same in Hungary, and that's what I kind of expect. And we'll see, Jesse. But I suspect that the enthusiasm for Magyar in the European Union, there's probably a reason for that. And then his own character doesn't suggest that he's a particularly honorable or truthful person who will, live and die by his commitments to his voting public. Except, unfortunately, it's going to be too late because once your country is overrun by illegal immigrants, you can't easily get them out again.
Yes, interesting thoughts. And why don't you tell us about iSystem trend following and anywhere online where people can follow your work? Please direct us.
Sure. So I'm active on X. My handle is @nakedhedgy. And then as far as my publishing goes, I have two publications on Substack. One of them is iSystem Trend Compass, which is a daily trend following newsletter, which provides trend following signals for 19 global financial markets, but also including things like gold and Bitcoin. That's called iSystem Trend Following. And then I also have a personal publication on Substack called Alex Krainer Substack. I publish probably 3-4 articles a month, but they tend to be a bit more refined and more thoroughly researched, which unfortunately I can't do every day for Trend Compass.
Great. Well, I'll put links to all of that in the description below for people who want to check it out. Alex, once again, always great conversing with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Jesse. Always a pleasure to join you. Until the next time.
Thank you for joining us today. This episode is brought to you by ARC Silver, Gold, Osmium. They have some great specials on precious metals, bullion products. They are on your screen right now. These are subject to change and while supplies last. So reach out to owner Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com. Make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you, and represent sound money in style with the Stack Silver, not Fiat t-shirt available in the Commodity Culture shop. Use the link in the description below, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.